Part 1. Sacrifice. The fire that forges greatness. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine standing at the edge of two roads. One road is wide, smooth, and comfortable. It asks nothing from you except that you keep walking exactly as you always have. There are no sleepless nights waiting there, no difficult decisions, no painful goodbyes, no risk of failure. It is a life built on convenience, predictability, and safety. The other road is different. It is narrow, uneven, covered with uncertainty. Every step demands something from you, your comfort, your pride, your certainty. Sometimes even the approval of the people you love. Very few people choose that road, yet every person remembered by history walked it. Not because they enjoyed suffering, not because they were fearless, but because they discovered something that most people never understand. Greatness always requires a payment before it offers a reward. Every extraordinary life is built upon invisible sacrifices that no one applauds while they are happening. The applause comes later, the medals come later, the recognition comes later. History celebrates the victory but rarely witnesses the lonely nights that created it. People admire the mountain without seeing the thousands of difficult steps required to climb it. We celebrate champions, but ignore the mornings when they trained while everyone else slept. We admire successful entrepreneurs, but overlook the years they lived with uncertainty, while everyone else sought security. We praise spiritual giants while forgetting the countless moments they chose obedience over comfort. Sacrifice is invisible while it is happening. Only after enough time passes do people call it greatness. The world has taught us to pursue happiness above all else. We are told to avoid discomfort, to eliminate inconvenience, to choose the easiest option whenever possible. Every advertisement promises more comfort. Every invention promises less effort. Every distraction offers immediate pleasure. But history whispers a different lesson. The greatest civilizations were not built by people searching for comfort. The greatest discoveries were not made by people avoiding difficulty. The greatest acts of courage were never performed by people waiting until they felt ready. They were performed by ordinary men and women who decided that something mattered more than comfort. That decision changed everything. There is a strange law that governs every meaningful achievement. Before you receive something valuable, you must first release something valuable. The seed disappears before the tree appears. The caterpillar surrenders its old life before becoming a butterfly. Gold enters the fire before becoming pure. Nothing precious arrives without transformation. Transformation always demands sacrifice. Nature understands this principle perfectly. The seasons surrender themselves to each other. Autumn lets go of its leaves. Winter endures silence. Spring emerges through patience. Summer gives away its abundance. Nothing clings forever. Everything meaningful grows through cycles of surrender. Human beings are the same. Every new version of yourself requires the death of an old version. The disciplined person sacrifices laziness. The wise person sacrifices arrogance. The courageous person sacrifices certainty. The faithful person sacrifices control. The loving person sacrifices selfishness. Growth is impossible without letting something go. Yet this is where most people stop. They want change without loss, success without discipline, strength without struggle, purpose without responsibility. They want the harvest without planting, the crown without the cross, the victory without the battle. Life has never worked that way. It never will. Thousands of years ago, a young shepherd walked into a valley where an entire army stood frozen in fear. They were trained soldiers, experienced warriors, men carrying weapons and armor. Yet none of them moved. Across the valley stood a giant whose voice alone was enough to make hardened fighters lose their courage. Then a teenager arrived. He carried no sword, no armor, no military experience, only a sling, 5 smooth stones, and an unshakable belief that courage is measured not by size but by conviction. David sacrificed the safety of staying silent. He sacrificed the security of remaining unnoticed. He risked everything. One stone changed history. People remember the giant falling. Few remember the sacrifice that happened first. The willingness to walk forward when everyone else stepped backward. That is the birthplace of greatness. Every generation faces its own giants. Sometimes they wear uniforms. Sometimes they wear suits. Sometimes they exist only inside our minds. Fear, doubt, addiction, comfort, procrastination, regret. These giants do not disappear because we wish them away. They disappear when someone decides that purpose matters more than fear. That decision is sacrifice, and every great story begins there. Part 2. The price that history never sees. Every masterpiece begins long before anyone notices it. The towering cathedral begins as rough stone buried beneath the earth. The magnificent symphony begins as silence. The mighty oak begins as a fragile seed hidden beneath the soil. Greatness is never born in the spotlight. It is born in hidden places, behind closed doors, in lonely decisions, in moments when no applause can be heard. That is the strange paradox of sacrifice. The world celebrates what is visible. Heaven rewards what is invisible. Long before anyone called him the Savior, Jesus lived an ordinary life. For nearly 30 years there were no crowds shouting his name, no miracles recorded, no sermons that shook nations, no triumphal entry into Jerusalem. There was only quiet obedience. Think about that for a moment. The one Christians believe came to redeem humanity spent most of his earthly life in obscurity. In a world obsessed with instant success, he embraced hidden preparation. Because purpose matures in silence before it changes the world. Then came the wilderness. 40 days. No comfort, no luxury, no audience. Only hunger, only isolation, only temptation. The enemy did not begin by offering pain. He began by offering shortcuts. Turn stones into bread. Take the kingdoms without the cross. Prove yourself. How often are we tempted the same way? We want success without patience, influence without character, recognition without discipline, power without responsibility. The greatest temptations in life are rarely invitations to do something obviously evil. More often, they are invitations to abandon the process, to reach the destination without becoming the person capable of carrying it. Jesus refused every shortcut not because they were easy, but because shortcuts often rob us of the very transformation we need. The cross did not begin on Calvary. It began in the wilderness. It began with the daily sacrifice of choosing obedience over convenience. Every difficult decision afterward was built upon thousands of smaller decisions that no one ever saw. That is how character is formed, not in one dramatic moment, but through countless quiet choices. History remembers the cross. Heaven remembers every step that led toward it. The same pattern appears throughout Scripture. Moses lived 40 years as a prince, then 40 years as a shepherd. Only afterward did he become the leader who confronted Pharaoh. Imagine spending 4 decades believing your greatest opportunities had passed. Imagine watching your dreams disappear into the ordinary routine of caring for sheep. Many people would have concluded their lives had become meaningless. But God was preparing a deliverer. Sometimes your greatest season of preparation looks exactly like delay. Joseph understood this better than anyone. He dreamed of greatness while still a teenager. Then everything fell apart. His own brothers sold him. He became a slave. He was falsely accused, thrown into prison, forgotten by those he helped. Every chapter of his life seemed to move farther away from the promise. Years passed. Nothing changed, except Joseph. The prison shaped him. The injustice strengthened him. The loneliness deepened his wisdom. The waiting refined his heart. When Pharaoh finally called him, Joseph possessed something greater than intelligence. He possessed maturity. Without the sacrifice of those hidden years, he could never have carried the weight of leadership. The palace required the prison. The crown required the chains. We often ask God for bigger opportunities. Rarely do we ask him for the character required to survive them. Character is expensive. It costs pride. It costs impatience. It costs ego. But without paying that price, success becomes dangerous. History is filled with gifted people destroyed by victories they were not prepared to handle. Talent can open a door. Only character keeps it open. The ancient Stoic philosophers understood something remarkably similar. They believed comfort weakens the human spirit when it becomes life's highest goal. Seneca wrote that difficulties strengthen the mind just as labor strengthens the body. Muscles grow because resistance tears them apart before rebuilding them stronger. The human spirit grows the same way. Every disappointment carries hidden strength. Every hardship contains unseen instruction. Every sacrifice plants invisible seeds that bloom much later. Marcus Aurelius ruled one of the greatest empires in history. Yet each morning he reminded himself that he would meet ungrateful, dishonest, selfish, and arrogant people, not because he was cynical, because he understood reality. Preparing his mind for difficulty made him capable of responding with wisdom instead of surprise. Modern culture teaches us to expect comfort. The Stoics trained themselves to expect challenge. One expectation creates frustration, the other creates resilience. There is a profound difference. Consider the blacksmith forging a sword. The steel does not become stronger because someone admires it. It becomes stronger because it survives fire, because it endures hammer after hammer after hammer. Each strike appears destructive, yet every strike gives the blade greater strength. If the steel could speak, it might mistake the hammer for an enemy. But the blacksmith knows what the steel cannot yet understand. The blows are not punishment, they are preparation. Many seasons of life feel exactly like that. Plans collapse, doors close, relationships end, dreams seem delayed. We ask, why is this happening to me? Perhaps a better question is, what is this preparing me for? Not every hardship has meaning. Not every tragedy has an easy explanation. But human beings often discover unexpected strength through the trials they endure. Again and again, history reveals the same pattern. The people who shape the world are often first shaped by suffering, not because suffering is good in itself, but because the response to suffering can transform an ordinary person into someone extraordinary. The fire does not create gold, it reveals it. The storm does not create deep roots. It exposes which trees truly have them. Sacrifice works the same way. It reveals what we love most. When comfort and purpose stand on opposite sides of the road, every choice becomes a declaration of our deepest values. Sooner or later, every life reaches that crossroads. The question is never whether sacrifice will be required. The only question is what we are willing to sacrifice and what we refuse to lose. And history suggests that those who choose purpose over comfort rarely regret the price once they see the person they have become. Part 3. The loneliness of those who choose the harder path. Every sacrifice carries a hidden companion, loneliness, not because people hate greatness, but because few people understand it while it is being built. There comes a moment in every meaningful journey when the crowd stops walking beside you. At first, everyone applauds your dreams. They tell you to follow your passion, to believe in yourself, to chase your purpose. But the moment your dream begins demanding sacrifices they would never make themselves, something changes. The applause grows quieter, the invitations become fewer. Some people begin questioning your decisions, others quietly disappear. A few may even hope you fail, because your discipline reminds them of the excuses they continue to make. This has always been true. Noah spent decades building an ark before a single drop of rain fell. Imagine the ridicule. Imagine waking every morning to the laughter of people convinced you had wasted your life. Every hammer strike echoed with mockery. Every wooden beam became another reason for others to call him foolish. Yet Noah kept building. Faith often looks like foolishness until the flood arrives. Most people measure wisdom by immediate results, but true conviction is measured by the willingness to continue before results appear. That is why sacrifice always demands vision. You must see what others cannot yet see. Without vision, every sacrifice feels meaningless. With vision, every sacrifice becomes an investment. This principle appears everywhere in life. A medical student studies while friends celebrate. A young entrepreneur works through weekends while others relax. A mother stays awake through countless sleepless nights because love values another life above personal comfort. An athlete repeats the same movement thousands of times until it becomes instinct. None of these sacrifices are glamorous. Most are repetitive, ordinary, quiet, but extraordinary lives are built from ordinary acts repeated with extraordinary commitment. People often ask what separates successful people from everyone else. Many assume the answer is intelligence, talent, luck, opportunity. Those things matter. But history repeatedly points towards something deeper. The willingness to endure boredom, to remain faithful when progress feels invisible, to continue long after excitement disappears. Anyone can be motivated for one day. Very few remain committed for 10 years. Discipline begins where motivation ends. That is why sacrifice is never a single decision. It is thousands of decisions, choosing today's responsibility over today's comfort again and again and again. The Apostle Paul understood this better than almost anyone. His life after encountering Christ was not marked by comfort. He was imprisoned, beaten, rejected, shipwrecked, hungry, misunderstood. Yet his letters contain astonishing words. He speaks of joy, peace, contentment. How is that possible? Because joy built upon circumstances disappears when circumstances change. Joy built upon purpose survives almost anything. Paul had discovered something and suffering could not steal. A person who knows why they are living can survive almost any hardship. Centuries later, another man would discover the same truth under unimaginably darker conditions. His name was Viktor Frankl. Inside the concentration camps of the Second World War, nearly everything was taken from him. His possessions, his freedom, his family, his future. Even his name was replaced by a number. Yet after surviving one of history's greatest horrors, Frankl reached a profound conclusion. Everything can be taken from a person except one final freedom, the freedom to choose one's response. That choice became his victory. His captors controlled his body. They could not control his soul unless he surrendered it. Sacrifice often begins exactly there. When circumstances refuse to obey us, when life becomes unfair, when pain arrives uninvited. We cannot always choose what happens, but we can choose who we become because of what happens. That choice shapes destiny. History remembers those who refused to surrender their character when everything else had already been taken. The world measures wealth by what people possess. Wisdom measures wealth by what cannot be taken away. Integrity, faith, compassion, courage, hope. These treasures survive every economic collapse, every political revolution, every personal tragedy. No thief can steal them. No government can confiscate them. No recession can reduce them. They are purchased only through sacrifice. There is another truth that many people spend their entire lives avoiding. Sacrifice often requires disappointing people, not because you wish to hurt them, but because purpose cannot be directed by everyone's expectations. Jesus experienced this repeatedly. Many wanted him to become a political king. Others demanded miracles on command. Some expected him to overthrow Rome. Others wanted signs before they would believe. He refused to become the person everyone demanded. Instead, he remained faithful to the mission his father had given him. Purpose often means saying no to good opportunities so you can remain faithful to the greatest one. Many lives become distracted not by evil choices but by countless good choices that slowly pull them away from their highest calling. Focus is sacrifice. Every yes requires 1,000 no's. The sculptor removes stone to reveal beauty. The gardener prunes healthy branches so stronger fruit can grow. The musician practices scales instead of chasing constant entertainment. Creation always involves subtraction. Perhaps that is why simplicity is so powerful. The more clearly you know what truly matters, the easier it becomes to release everything that does not. Most people are exhausted not because life asks too much of them. They are exhausted because they carry too many unnecessary burdens. Comparison, resentment, fear of missing out, the desperate need for approval. These invisible weights slow every journey. Sacrifice is not only about giving up comfort. Sometimes it is about laying down the emotional baggage that has quietly controlled us for years. Forgiveness is sacrifice. Humility is sacrifice. Patience is sacrifice. Choosing peace over revenge is sacrifice. Choosing truth over popularity is sacrifice. Choosing love over pride is sacrifice. These choices rarely make headlines, yet they transform families, communities, nations. The greatest revolutions often begin inside a single human heart, because when one person changes, generations can change after them. Every meaningful legacy begins with someone willing to pay a price others refuse to pay. And perhaps that is the deepest mystery of sacrifice. You never fully know who will benefit from the price you choose to pay today. The seeds you plant may grow into trees whose shade you will never personally enjoy. But someone will, and sometimes that is reason enough to keep walking. Part 4. When the fire becomes your teacher, there comes a season in every meaningful life when sacrifice no longer feels like a choice. It becomes a way of living. The things that once seemed impossible slowly become ordinary. The early mornings no longer feel like punishment. Discipline no longer feels like restriction. Patience no longer feels like weakness. You begin to realize something extraordinary. The sacrifice that once frightened you has quietly transformed you into someone stronger than the person who first made the decision. This is how fire works. Fire never asks permission before it changes what it touches. Wood becomes ash, iron becomes steel, clay becomes pottery, gold becomes pure. Every element that survives the fire emerges different than before. Human beings are no different. Pain changes us. The only question is whether it changes us into something stronger or something bitter. Bitterness is one of the greatest dangers of sacrifice. Many people give everything they have, yet become angry because life never rewarded them the way they expected. They begin believing the world owes them something: recognition, justice, success, gratitude. When those things fail to arrive, their hearts slowly harden. But true sacrifice expects no applause. Its reward is not merely found in what it receives. Its reward is found in what it becomes. That is why two people can experience the same hardship and emerge completely different. One becomes cynical, the other becomes compassionate. One loses hope, the other discovers purpose. The difference is rarely the pain. The difference is the response. History gives us countless examples. Consider Abraham Lincoln. Before he became one of America's most respected presidents, his life seemed like a long list of disappointments. He lost elections. He failed in business. He suffered crushing personal grief. He battled deep melancholy that would likely be recognized today as severe depression. Many people would have concluded that destiny had rejected them. Lincoln refused. Every defeat became another lesson in perseverance. Every setback deepened his empathy. When civil war eventually tore his nation apart, he possessed something that victory alone could never have given him: compassion. Because those who have suffered often understand suffering better than those who have only succeeded. His greatest strength was not his speeches, it was his humanity. Pain had enlarged his heart instead of shrinking it. That is one of sacrifice's greatest miracles. If we allow it, suffering can make us more capable of loving others instead of less. The same truth appeared in the life of Nelson Mandela, 27 years. Imagine losing nearly 3 decades behind prison walls. Entire generations grew up while he remained confined. The world changed, technology advanced. Children became adults, friends grew old, his youth quietly disappeared. Most people would have emerged consumed by revenge. Mandela chose forgiveness. That decision shocked the world, because forgiveness is one of the most expensive sacrifices a human being can ever make. It requires surrendering the desire to make someone else suffer as you have suffered. It feels unfair, it feels impossible. Yet without forgiveness, yesterday continues controlling tomorrow. Mandela understood that prison bars are not always made of steel. Sometimes they are made of hatred. Sometimes they are made of resentment. Sometimes they are built from memories we refuse to release. Freedom begins long before doors open. Freedom begins when the heart refuses to remain captive. Every generation faces this choice. Will pain become your prison or your teacher? There is another lesson hidden inside sacrifice that modern culture desperately needs to remember. Everything meaningful grows slowly. A tree does not apologize for taking years to mature. A river does not rush toward the ocean. The sunrise never hurries because someone is impatient. Nature is never anxious. Only human beings constantly demand immediate results. We plant today and expect harvest tomorrow. We begin exercising and expect transformation within weeks. We start praying and expect instant answers. But nearly everything valuable follows a slower rhythm. Character grows slowly, trust grows slowly, wisdom grows slowly, love grows slowly, faith grows slowly. The greatest achievements are almost always the product of thousands of ordinary days lived faithfully. This is where most dreams quietly die, not because they were impossible, because people underestimated the time required. They confused delay with denial. They mistake slow progress for failure. They abandon the journey just before breakthrough begins. Think of the bamboo tree. For years after it is planted, almost nothing appears above the ground. Someone watching casually might assume nothing is happening. But beneath the surface, an extraordinary root system is spreading in every direction. Only after those unseen foundations are strong enough does the bamboo suddenly grow at astonishing speed. Success often works exactly like that. The invisible years create the visible moments. People celebrate the overnight success while ignoring the decade of preparation that made it possible. Every concert admired by thousands began with lonely practice sessions. Every best-selling author first faced blank pages. Every respected leader first learned to follow. Every courageous act began as an unseen decision inside an ordinary heart. The world notices the fruit. God often watches the roots. Perhaps that is why Scripture repeatedly emphasizes faithfulness instead of fame. Faithfulness can exist in complete obscurity. A parent raising children with love, a teacher encouraging students no one else believes in, a nurse caring for forgotten patients, a farmer planting seeds he may never personally harvest. These people may never become famous, yet they quietly hold the world together. History is not only shaped by kings and presidents, it is shaped by ordinary people making extraordinary sacrifices that no newspaper will ever print. Perhaps heaven measures greatness differently than we do. Perhaps greatness has never been about how many people know your name. Perhaps it has always been about how faithfully you loved, served, endured, and remained true when nobody was watching. Because the deepest victories are rarely public. They happen inside the human soul, when fear loses its control, when pride finally surrenders, when forgiveness replaces hatred, when hope survives disappointment, when love continues despite pain. These victories cannot be photographed, yet they are the victories that ultimately shape every other part of life. The fire continues burning, not to destroy you, but to reveal the person you were always capable of becoming. And if you remain faithful to the process, one day you will look back and realize something remarkable. The hardest seasons were never sent merely to test your strength. They were preparing you to become someone capable of carrying a purpose far greater than yourself. Part 5. The courage to stand alone. There is a question that quietly follows every human being through life. It does not ask how talented you are. It does not ask how much money you have. It does not ask how many people admire you. It asks something far more important. Asterisk, who are you when standing alone costs you everything? History remembers those moments, not because they were comfortable, but because they revealed character that could not be bought. Every generation produces crowds. Only a few individuals are willing to stand against them. Crowds are powerful. They offer acceptance. They provide safety. They remove responsibility. When everyone moves in the same direction, it becomes easy to believe the crowd must be right. But truth has never been determined by numbers. If it were, nearly every great reformer would have been wrong. Every prophet would have been mistaken. Every revolutionary who changed the course of history would have remained silent. The greatest changes in history almost always began with one person willing to stand where everyone else refused. Think about Joan of Arc. She was not born into wealth. She was not raised in power. She was a teenage girl living in a divided nation. Everything about her circumstances suggested she would live an ordinary life. Yet she believed she had been called to something greater than herself. Kings doubted her. Generals questioned her. Scholars mocked her. Enemies hunted her. Still she continued. Eventually she was captured, placed on trial, condemned, burned alive. She was only 19 years old. Most people remember the flames. Few remember the courage that burned brighter than them. True courage is not the absence of fear. It is refusing to allow fear to become your master. Fear speaks loudly. It whispers that failure will define you, that rejection will destroy you, that criticism will break you. But fear has one weakness. It cannot predict the future. Nearly every fear that controls people today never actually becomes reality. And those that do often reveal strength they never knew they possessed. Consider the Wright brothers. 2 bicycle mechanics, no engineering degrees, no government funding, no powerful institutions supporting them. Experts insisted human flight was impossible. Scientists laughed. Newspapers ridiculed them. Even friends questioned their sanity. Yet day after day they continued building, testing, failing, trying again. One crash after another, broken wings, broken machines, bloody hands, discouraging setbacks. Still they returned. Until one morning in 1903, a machine heavier than air lifted from the ground. The flight lasted only 12 seconds. 12 seconds. Today that seems insignificant, but those 12 seconds changed human history forever. Every airplane, every international journey, every astronaut who later left Earth's atmosphere, all trace their origins back to 2 men who refused to surrender after repeated failure. History often changes through moments that appear incredibly small. Never underestimate the power of faithful persistence. A single conversation can change a life. One act of kindness can interrupt despair. One decision can redirect an entire generation. We imagine greatness arriving through dramatic moments. More often, it arrives disguised as ordinary faithfulness. Mother Teresa understood this. She once said that not all of us can do great things, but we can do small things with great love. What a remarkable truth. Love transforms ordinary actions into extraordinary ones. A glass of water offered with compassion, a listening ear, a forgiving heart, an encouraging word spoken at exactly the right moment. These acts rarely receive awards, yet they quietly reshape lives. Sacrifice is not always measured by the size of the action. Sometimes it is measured by the size of the love behind it. That is why the widow's small offering meant more than the rich man's abundance. She gave not from excess, she gave from trust. The value of sacrifice has never been determined by its price. It is determined by what it costs the heart. There is another danger that appears whenever someone begins pursuing purpose: pride. Ironically, sacrifice itself can become a source of arrogance. A person begins believing they are better because they have suffered more. They compare their discipline to someone else's weakness. Their sacrifices become trophies instead of acts of love. This is one of the oldest temptations in human history. Humility protects sacrifice from becoming self-worship. The greatest leaders never forget they are servants. Jesus demonstrated this in one unforgettable moment. The night before his crucifixion, knowing his earthly life was nearly over, he did something no king would normally do. He knelt. He washed the feet of his disciples. The Creator served his creation. The teacher became the servant. The master became the example. Power expressed itself through humility. What kind of kingdom works like that? Not one built upon ego, not one sustained by domination, but one established through sacrificial love. The world often says that greatness means climbing above others. Christ demonstrated that greatness often means kneeling beside them. That lesson continues challenging every generation. Leadership is not measured by how many people serve you. It is measured by how many people become stronger because you serve them. Imagine if every parent lived that way, every teacher, every employer, every political leader, every friend. How different would the world become? The greatest influence rarely comes through force. It comes through example. People may forget your words, they rarely forget your character. Years after your voice becomes silent, your example continues speaking. That is legacy. Not merely leaving behind possessions, but leaving behind principles, values, hope, faith, courage. These are the inheritances that never lose their value. Every sacrifice you make today teaches someone else what matters tomorrow. Children learn by watching. Communities learn by observing. Nations learn by remembering. Whether you realize it or not, someone is always studying the life you are living. Someone is discovering what courage looks like by watching your response to hardship. Someone is learning what forgiveness looks like through your decisions. Someone is finding hope because you refuse to surrender. You may never know their names. You may never hear their stories. But your faithfulness reaches farther than you can imagine. Every great life becomes a light for another, and every light first had to survive the darkness. The journey is not over. The fire still burns, but by now, something inside you has begun to change. You are no longer simply enduring sacrifice, you are beginning to understand its purpose. And once you understand its purpose, nothing can ever make you see hardship the same way again. Part 6. When everything falls apart. There is a moment in every great story when it seems the story is over. The dream collapses, the doors close, the people you trusted walk away. The prayers seem unanswered. The future you imagined disappears before your eyes. These moments have a way of convincing us that failure has the final word. But history tells a different story. Sometimes the breaking point is actually the turning point. A seed must first split apart before life can emerge. An eagle must struggle out of its shell before it can fly. Even stars are born from collapsing clouds of dust. Creation often begins with what looks like destruction. Human life follows the same mysterious pattern. Think about Job. In a matter of days, he lost almost everything. His wealth vanished. His servants were gone. His children died. His health deteriorated. Even those closest to him questioned his faith. If anyone had reason to surrender, it was Job. Yet in the middle of unbearable suffering, he uttered words that have echoed across centuries. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Those words were not spoken because he understood everything. They were spoken because he trusted even when understanding failed. Faith is not the absence of questions. Faith is choosing trust when the answers remain hidden. Modern society often believes confidence comes from having complete certainty. Real confidence comes from learning to walk through uncertainty. Every explorer understands this. Every inventor, every pioneer, every missionary, every entrepreneur, every parent, every dreamer. No meaningful journey comes with a complete map. If you wait until every question has been answered, you will never begin. Faith always takes the first step before the staircase becomes visible. This truth appears again in the life of Peter. One stormy night, he stepped out of a boat and walked toward Jesus. For a brief moment, something impossible happened. Man walked on water. Then Peter noticed the wind. He looked at the waves. Fear replaced faith. He began to sink. Many people think the lesson is simply about doubt, but there is another lesson hidden beneath the surface. Peter was the only disciple who knew what it felt like to walk on water. The others stayed safe inside the boat. They avoided failure, but they also missed the miracle. Too many people spend their entire lives protecting themselves from failure. They never realize they have also protected themselves from extraordinary possibilities. Comfort is expensive, not because of what it costs today, because of what it quietly steals tomorrow. Every opportunity carries risk. Every relationship requires vulnerability. Every calling demands courage. The safest life is often the smallest life. There is another man whose story reminds us of this truth, Thomas Edison. People remember the light bulb. Few remember the thousands of unsuccessful attempts that came before it. When asked about his failures, he famously replied that he had not failed. He had simply found thousands of ways that did not work. What an extraordinary perspective. Failure was not evidence to stop, it was information. Every mistake taught him something useful. Every setback moved him one step closer to success. Imagine how different our lives would become if we viewed failure that way. Not as proof that we are incapable, but as proof that we are learning. Children understand this naturally. A child falls hundreds of times before learning to walk. Yet no healthy child concludes, walking is not for me. They simply stand again, and again, and again. Somewhere along the way, adults begin fearing failure more than remaining unchanged. We stop trying, we stop risking, we stop believing. Not because we lack ability, because we fear embarrassment. But history has never been shaped by people who avoided embarrassment. It has been shaped by people who were willing to look foolish in pursuit of something meaningful. The Apostle Peter denied Jesus 3 times. Imagine carrying that failure. Imagine hearing the rooster crow. Imagine remembering Jesus' warning. One terrible night could have defined Peter forever. Instead, it became the beginning of restoration. Failure became part of his testimony, not its conclusion. How many people are imprisoned by mistakes that God has already forgiven? How many dreams remain buried because someone believes one failure has disqualified them forever? Grace tells another story. Grace says your worst chapter does not have to become your final chapter. Redemption is one of the most beautiful themes in all of history. Broken people becoming whole, lost people finding purpose, enemies becoming friends, failures becoming leaders. The Bible is filled with imperfect people whom God used in extraordinary ways. Moses had doubts. David committed terrible sins. Jonah ran away. Peter denied Christ. Paul once persecuted Christians. Yet none of those failures had the final word. Because grace writes endings that human judgment never expects. Perhaps that is why sacrifice and hope are inseparable. Without hope, sacrifice feels meaningless. With hope, even suffering becomes bearable. The early Christians understood this. Many faced persecution. Some lost their homes. Others lost their freedom. Some even lost their lives, yet they continued gathering, continued praying, continued serving, continued loving. Why? Because they believed that what awaited them was greater than what stood against them. Hope gave meaning to sacrifice. Hope transformed endurance into courage. Hope allowed ordinary people to accomplish extraordinary things. The same principle remains true today. The person who loses hope eventually loses direction. But the person who keeps hope alive can survive astonishing hardship. Hope is more than optimism. Optimism says things might improve. Hope says there is purpose even while they have not improved yet. That difference changes everything. Because hope does not depend upon perfect circumstances. It depends upon a deeper conviction. A conviction that darkness is temporary. That winter eventually gives way to spring. That pain can produce wisdom. That brokenness can become beauty. That sacrifice is never wasted when it is offered in love. Perhaps you are walking through such a season now. Perhaps your prayers seem unanswered. Perhaps your efforts appear unnoticed. Perhaps your sacrifices feel invisible. Do not mistake invisible for meaningless. Roots are invisible, yet they hold forests together. Foundations are invisible, yet they support skyscrapers. Character is invisible, yet it carries the weight of destiny. The greatest work God often does is the work no one else can see. And one day, when the time is right, the invisible will become visible. The hidden will bear fruit. The waiting will make sense. And you will discover that every sacrifice made in faith was quietly preparing a future you could never have imagined. Part 7. The legacy of those refused to keep. If you study history long enough, one pattern begins to appear over and over again. The people who changed the world were rarely the strongest. They were rarely the richest. They were rarely the most talented. What separated them was something much quieter. They refused to quit. Persistence is one of the rarest forms of courage. Anyone can begin, very few continue. Starting is exciting, finishing is sacred. There is something remarkable about the human spirit. When it refuses to surrender, it bends, it bleeds, it grows weary. But somehow it continues moving forward, not because the road becomes easier, because the purpose becomes greater than the pain. This truth is beautifully illustrated in the life of Winston Churchill. During the darkest days of the Second World War, much of Europe had already fallen. Cities burned, families mourned. Hope seemed to disappear beneath clouds of smoke. Many believed defeat was inevitable. Yet Churchill stood before a frightened nation and spoke words that carried the weight of unwavering conviction. He did not promise comfort. He did not promise an easy victory. He promised struggle. He promised sacrifice. He promised perseverance. And then he declared that they would never surrender. Those words did not end the war, but they changed the hearts of people who would fight it. Sometimes victory begins long before the battle is won. It begins the moment fear no longer controls the human heart. The same lesson appears in countless lives. Consider Helen Keller. Before she reached her second birthday, illness left her unable to see or hear. Imagine growing up in complete darkness and silence. No spoken language, no music, no sunrise, no familiar voices. Many assumed her life would always remain limited. Then one woman entered her world, Anne Sullivan. Patiently, faithfully, day after day. She placed words into Helen's hands before Helen understood their meaning. Water, tree, mother, love. For weeks there was confusion, frustration, silence. Then one afternoon everything changed. Water flowed over Helen's hand as Anne spelled the word into her palm. Suddenly the connection was made. Language burst into life. A door opened that would never close again. Helen Keller would eventually become an author, lecturer, and inspiration to millions. One breakthrough changed everything. Never underestimate the power of one moment, one conversation, one mentor, one act of kindness, one decision to keep going when quitting seemed easier. Entire futures often change because someone refused to give up one day too soon. There is another remarkable story hidden within nature itself. The giant sequoia trees of California are among the largest living organisms on Earth. Some have stood for thousands of years. Storms have struck them, lightning has scarred them, fires have surrounded them, yet they continue standing. Surprisingly, these massive trees do not survive because they possess incredibly deep roots. Their roots are relatively shallow. Instead, they survive because their roots become intertwined with the roots of neighboring trees. They hold each other up. What a powerful picture of humanity. Strength is rarely found in isolation. Even the strongest people need others. The greatest leaders have trusted friends. The wisest teachers continue learning. The bravest soldiers fight beside companions. One of the greatest lies pride ever tells us is that we must carry every burden alone. We were never created for isolation. Even Jesus surrounded himself with disciples. Even Moses needed Aaron. Even Paul traveled alongside faithful companions. Strength grows through community. Sacrifice becomes lighter when shared with others. This is why encouragement matters so much. You may never know how close someone is to giving up. A single word may become the reason they continue. A simple reminder that they are not forgotten. A quiet assurance that their struggle has meaning. Never underestimate the ministry of encouragement. Barnabas became known as the son of encouragement. He was not famous because he performed the greatest miracles. He became unforgettable because he strengthened others. Some people build their legacy by standing in the spotlight. Others build it by helping someone else reach the light. Both matter. But perhaps the second is even greater. Jesus once said that whoever desires to become great must become a servant. How radically different that is from the world's definition of success. The world says take. Jesus says give. The world says be first. Jesus says serve. The world says protect yourself. Jesus says lay down your life. The cross turned human ideas of greatness upside down. Power became sacrifice. Victory came through surrender. Life emerged from death. No philosophy before or since has challenged human pride so completely. And yet, history continues proving the wisdom of that message. The people remembered most lovingly are rarely those who accumulated the most. They are those who gave the most. Parents who sacrificed for children. Teachers who believed in forgotten students. Doctors who served during epidemics. Missionaries who crossed oceans. Firefighters who entered burning buildings. Volunteers who fed the hungry. Neighbors who quietly cared for one another. These people may never appear in history books, but they leave fingerprints on eternity. Because every act of sacrificial love creates ripples that travel farther than the eye can see. A child encouraged today may inspire thousands tomorrow. One generous decision may begin a chain of kindness stretching across generations. A single forgiven offense may heal an entire family. We rarely witness the full harvest of the seeds we plant, but that does not make the harvest any less real. This is why faithfulness is so powerful. Faithfulness trusts that today's unseen obedience will become tomorrow's visible blessing. It continues planting even when the ground appears empty. It continues loving even when love is not returned. It continues serving even when recognition never comes. Because true faithfulness is not sustained by applause. It is sustained by conviction. The world is desperately searching for extraordinary people. Perhaps what it truly needs is ordinary people who refuse to stop being faithful. People who tell the truth when lying would be easier. People who forgive when revenge feels justified. People who remain honest when dishonesty seems profitable. People who choose compassion over cruelty, hope over despair, light over darkness. Every civilization rises or falls upon the character of ordinary people making extraordinary choices. The future is not built only by presidents and kings. It is built by fathers who keep their promises, mothers who pray, teachers who refuse to stop believing, young people who choose integrity over popularity, workers who labor with excellence even when no one is watching. Nations become strong, one faithful life at a time, one courageous decision at a time, one sacrifice at a time. And perhaps, long after your name has been forgotten, long after your voice has grown silent, long after your footsteps have disappeared from the earth, the love you gave, the courage you showed, and the sacrifices you made will still be changing lives you never had the chance to meet. Because that is the mysterious power of a life lived for something greater than itself.